Hello and welcome to Back at Camp, Mohave County's only outdoor television show. I'm your host, Don Martin, and today we have a special 1-hour program with living legend Bernie Lawrence. Bernie is the last of the longtime lion trappers, a historian, and law enforcement man, and we've got a lot of information to talk about today. So don't go away. This is going to be a special show. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to Back at Camp. I'm your host, Don Martin. With me today is a very, very special guest, Bernie Lawrence. I've known Bernie for as long as I've been in Mohave County, and this man is truly a living legend, and I'm so honored to be here today with Bernie. Bernie, welcome to the show. Bernie, tell me a little bit about yourself.
I was born down in the southeast corner of the state at Pima, Arizona. And my father worked in the mines at Bisbee, and then he moved up to Globe, Miami, and worked in the mines there. And he contracted a damaged hip, and he got infection in that hip, and he wound up in the hospital. And this was during the Depression. Of course, he wasn't able to work at that time, and the mines had laid off. And he was supposed to die, according to his doctors, but he didn't accommodate him. He wound up in a wheelchair, and my mother had 4 of us kids by herself to take care of, so she sent for her brother, John Dexter, who was 17 years old, and he came out and helped her and was a provider for my mother and my brothers.
Now, what was your father's name?
Nathan Elvin Lawrence.
And your mom's name?
Frona Marie Dexter. She was a quarter Cherokee Indian and a very calm type individual, and always favored the underdog and did more than her share towards taking care of us, keeping the house going. My father finally got out of the hospital on crutches, first a wheelchair, then crutches. My uncle John had turned 18 and he went to work for the CCCs, 57 miles north of Globe, Arizona. There were a few people there. A fellow by the name of Buster Ellison had a ranch there, Alf DeVore. My father had a mining claim on Alf DeVore's ranch, and they moved there to that mining claim and lived there on the creek, and that was my introduction to wildlife. It was out in the sticks. The running water was you ran to the well that was hand dug, got a bucket of water and ran back to the house. There was no electricity in the area, and we were right up against the Apache Indian Reservation. As quick as the corn got up knee high, they were hanging over the fence hoping for corn. And if turkeys came down and got into the garden, they wound up getting eaten, and since we had no refrigeration, they were canned for winter use.
Wow.
Deer and whatever, it was part of our living, and those were my earliest years. And I never got away from the outdoors or wildlife. That was my first interest. Eventually, we wound up in a farming area, and I was in a Boy Scout troop, went to a Boy Scout Court of Honor at a Mormon church in Queen Creek, Arizona. We had a small farm there and livestock. At any rate, there was a fellow there that put on a program about what he did for a living. And he happened to be a government hunter for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I sat and listened to this guy, and he displayed his traps, and he showed pictures, he showed a movie. And I thought, they're paying this guy to hunt. That's what I want to be. That's what I'm going to. I didn't know they had such a thing. Anyway, afterwards, he took us down to his camp, showed us his traps and furs and all that stuff. And from that point on, I spent all the time I could out of doors. Everybody I could get a hold of that would talk about hunting or show me anything about hunting, I was out there with them.
Sure.
And learning. And I carried that thought up until I was 21 years old. And I tried to get on, and they didn't have much of a turnover. That's what it amounted to. I couldn't get the job. So I got a job with the Game and Fish Department as a fish culturist. That was the only opening they had. And raising trout and seining them and loading them and hauling them and distributing them, and then eventually driving a truck, getting feed out of Albuquerque and hauling it to them when they developed a commercial feed. At the same time, a friend of mine from Camp Verde went to work for them. And
this is the Game and Fish or Fish and Wildlife?
This is the Game and Fish Department.
Okay.
Anyway, through him and others, they got me the job with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service because I wanted to work in the animal end of it and out of doors, not carting fish around and putting them in streams for people to catch. It didn't make much sense to me to raise fish, dump them out in the stream so people could catch them, and I wasn't really happy with the job. At any rate, my first assignment was Payson, Arizona.
This is with U.S. Fish and Wildlife?
With the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And they sent me a little bit of everywhere to learn from the other men that were in the field what was expected of me. During that time, I wound up in Casa Grande, worked there with the sheep men. And then when they left there and went to the mountain with their sheep, I wound up being sent up to Globe, Arizona. And that gave me an opportunity to go back out on Cherry Creek. And I visited with Buster, and I said, Buster, you've been here for years, and you're raising your family here. How do you successfully trap mountain lions that are killing your stock consistently? He said, come with me. We went a horseback up, and he said, this place right here, see these number 5 bear traps? I never move them, I leave them right here. If there's no lion around, they're not killing my stock, I don't bother them. But if they start killing my stock, I know their habits, I know their trails, I know their scent stations. I just come up here and set these 2 traps, and in a little while, those toms will wander through and get in the trap. And if a female's in, why, she'll be looking for a tom or on the same travel way, I'll get rid of her. And he said, I've been doing this for years, they never run out. They just keep coming, and they just keep killing my calves, and I just keep killing them. Anyway, he showed me how he set the trap. And I said, would a lion go through a place like that? I'm thinking coyote. Coyote wouldn't come near it.
Right.
He said, oh, I've got this one because there was rocks, and I couldn't bury that big trap. So I just made a row of cactus to force him to come over here where there's some dirt. Oh. And I said, why do you have poles across over that trap? And he said, well, the lion kind of goes under that, but he can see straight through, and that keeps me from catching my own cattle, because I don't like to catch them because it cuts the blood off in their foot, and then their foot rots off. So they're just little things like that you have to know. And I said, well, how do you keep small animals out of your traps? You're telling me they don't come by but once every 3 weeks on an average, making their circle. And he said, oh, that's easy. I just have developed a weight device, and it'll hold the little things up, but the lion, when he throws all his weight on that foot to step another step, it releases and drops him down deep, and I catch him up here, and there's no chance of losing him by pulling his toes off. And I said, well, why do you use such a big trap? He says, the smaller traps that they've developed are too slow. He'll beat them, he'll feel it give, and he'll beat that trap. I have to use a bigger one because it's made different at a low pan, and it'll get him deep. I said, okay. Anyway, it wasn't too long after that that the boss was Everett Mercer, had been at the business for years and was well respected. He took care of any complaint anywhere in the state through his field force. And they had one guy that consistently could trap lion, and he was Russell Culvers on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation. Anyway, Russell was pretty much, I learned it the hard way, you can learn it the hard way. They sent me up there to learn off of Russell. And I hung around with him for a week, and he wasn't overly friendly, and he really didn't want any competition. So I left there and went back to Globe. The two bosses, the supervisor and the second guy under him who was training to take his place when he retired, they had this thing going. They wanted to do an experiment and teach a guy that didn't know how to trap lions, then have that person teach other people how to trap lions. This was something they had wanted, the old man wanted to do for years, Everett Mercer. And Bob said, well, the best one that I could pick out is Bernie Lawrence. He runs them with dogs, and he's a good trapper, but he's never really trapped lions. So they asked me if I'd be interested in doing that. And I said, sure, I'd love to do that. But I found out that the people they were putting me with to train me weren't really wanting to train me. So I went back to Buster and I said, Buster, here's where I am. And he said, oh, it's no big deal. Those government traps that they'll assign to you, you couldn't catch nothing with them. They got the high arch, and when a lion steps on him, he'll beat him. You may get a toe or two. That's all you're going to get. And they haven't got brains enough to adjust those traps. And he says, I never fooled with them. I just got a big bear trap and something that would work. But you go back to Russell and you look at his traps, and if he's catching lions, he's altered them, and you find out how he altered them. So I went back to Russell, and I spent another week with Russell. And then finally he says, you know, Bernie, I don't want to do this, and I know better to do this, but I'll show you how I alter these traps. And you won't have no, you know enough that you can catch them. And this is against my better judgment. So we go down to the engine shop, and they take a torch and they heat these new traps that's got an arch and bend the thing out flat. In the process, they break the cast iron trigger. So then they have to build a new trigger and put in it. Anyway, in the process, I learned how to overhaul those traps and make them faster.
Bernie, let's take a break right now. Folks, is this not fantastic? Man, this is great. We're going to take a little short break, give Bernie a break here, and when we come back, we're going to listen to Bernie tell us some more stories about how he became a lion trapper and a law enforcement man and all that kind of stuff. So don't go away. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back on this special show with Bernie Lawrence. Welcome back to Back at Camp. I'm your host, Don Martin, and with me today is legend Bernie Lawrence. Bernie is telling us how he learned how to lion trap. We're going to turn it back over to him. Bernie, tell us some more how you became able to trap these lions.
Once I figured out how to adjust the traps that they gave me, I started catching lions. And after I caught 16, they decided I knew well enough to take on the project, and that the project would be successful. So they moved me to Kingman.
Now, what year was that about?
This was in the late 50s.
Okay.
And they said, we have never successfully, even with dogs, been able to help those people in Mojave County because it's so dry. And most dogs are hunted in the wintertime in wet conditions or snow.
Right.
And we don't really have any dry country dogs available. So we're going to try this trapping program, and we know you can catch them now. And we expect you to succeed, and we also expect you to teach them how to trap, because we'll have pressure put on us and we won't be able to continue to do it. But we would like to see it established that if a person wants to protect their livestock, they can do it.
Right.
Without just one person in a million being able to do it for them. Anyway, I moved here to Kingman with my outfit, my family, and started.
You're married now?
Yep, I married Barbara Jane Elizabeth Smith, and we had 3 kids at that time when we came to Kingman. The 4th child was born here in this old hospital before they tore it down. Anyway, I'm spending a lot of time living with the lions, trapping the lions, finding all their travel ways, all their scent stations that I could find. And I found that there were only a few places where they had hot spots where they came through. If a lion was in the country, he came through those spots. I could set traps in a lot of places, but the ones that really produced were the major traffic, and that one of the hottest spots was up on the Music Mountain Rim at Westwater, where the lions come up out of Spencer Canyon, and Mawatka, that was another canyon, and onto that Frank Hunt Ranch, which now the Hunts are passed away, and their ashes are scattered there on that ranch. But the Wallapai Indians, they sold it back. They sold it to the Wallapais. It's actually BLM land. Anyway, on that ranch, I taught Frank Hunt, his nickname was Buzz, to trap. And he kept track of the lions he caught for 30 years, and he'd caught over 300 out of 2 traps that I had left there with him that were never moved. He did like Buster. He would just reset them. He didn't try to trap lions all over the country. He set at that key spot because of the canyons and the rim. It was the major focal point in that whole rim area. And today you can go there and you can catch lions in the same place. The largest lion that I caught come up out of that Grand Canyon, and the Grand Canyon, by the way, keeps and has kept this end of the country supplied with lions and will continue to. The Indians, they had burros, they had horses that were wild, they had bighorn sheep, they had deer, they had antelope. They had a factory to feed lions, and they supplied everywhere else with lions. And it didn't matter how many lions you caught, the lions would come back in just like Buster said they would. In fact, he said they would have bigger litters when there were less of them because there was less competition, and they'd repopulate anywhere from 4 to 5 years. You'd probably have more lions than you started with if you quit trapping them. You stimulated them because you increased their prey species by thinning them out. Also, you eliminated the old dominant toms that would only allow what they wanted to live in that area, and that includes females and kittens. They were, according to him, God in their domain. They killed everything else they didn't want in there. They allowed others to live there, including the females. And if they got crowded, they thinned things down.
That was the old dominant toms.
Yeah, the dominant toms. You kill them out, that give room for the young ones, and they were competing on an equal level. And pretty soon, you defeated your own purpose. You have created a bigger lion population. The only way that you could, from that point on, is you had to stay on top of them,
right,
and keep working. Quick as you laid off of them, in 4 years you got more lions than you started with.
They'd come back with a flurry.
They'd come back with a vengeance, and they had more to eat. of course, the prey species bounce back. You take a lion, he kills a large animal on the average of once a week. Now, somebody figured that out, wrote it down, and that became a fact, whether it was a fact or not. And a lot of things about wildlife that were written in books are still being written in books that were merely theories or sounded good to the writer. In fact, when you get out there and live with them, you find out that they're as much an individual as you and I. Some of them are super at what they were made for, and that's killing other animals and eating them. Others of them are fumblers. They can't find enough skunks and badgers and slow animals and porcupines to keep them alive, and they starve to death. They're just not handy at it. I had a ranch down on Trout Creek leased just for the hell of it, because I knew that the lion were thick in there and that I couldn't raise cattle in there and make any money. So I brought some Papago Indian cattle from down on the border that were tough and not used to having something to eat. And Jimmy Short and Jay Schroeder, they gave me a longhorn bull to use. And I bred up cattle that had no respect for fences, no more than an elk. And trying to gather those cattle, you'd had more luck gathering elk than you would those cattle.
Wow.
They ran through the fences, they jumped over the fences, they scattered all over that country down there. I never got more than 60%, except one year when really bared down on the lions and eliminated the lions in that area, and I got an 86% calf crop. Prior to that, when I wasn't killing them, I would get a 40 or to a 60% calf crop.
So those lions were taking those yearling or the newborn calves. They were getting almost half of them.
Well, once in a while they'd kill a grown animal. We were down there on the roundup, and this grandkid, he said, "I'm taking my horse home. Everywhere you look, there's lions. Why don't you kill them?" I said, "No, I'm just playing. And I know they're going to eat the calves, and I don't need it to make a living. I'm just experiencing what the ranchers do in this area and doing it firsthand." And he said, "You're nuts. You can't do that." And I said, "Well, I'm doing it." Anyway, this kid, he said, "I'm going to take my horse home." I said, "No, we're going to gather next week again, or try to gather. And besides that, he's raised down here since he's a yearling. He's been caught twice and bucked lions off. I don't know of a lion killing a grown horse in this area. I've known of them killing some in some areas, but I've never had them kill a full-grown horse. Don't worry about it." The next weekend, he goes to gather the horses out of the pasture. Guess whose horse was killed by a 125-pound lion? This is a 5-year-old gelding. Anyway, he never forgave me for that. He still doesn't forgive me for that.
Oh, wow.
And the other brother, he said, "Don't worry, Bradley, I'll take care of that SOB." And he did. He caught him and killed him. 125-pound lion killing a grown horse. That horse was down 3 times before he finally throttled him, but he killed him. And I know he was a beat-up lion because he still was scarred up when he was caught and killed.
Wow.
Anyway, lions are individuals. The largest,
just like you and I.
You bet. And some of them, they will get into a herd situation. I mean, they're just going along, and something gets up in front of them, bam, reflex. It's down, it's dead. They might not be hungry. They might not even eat on that thing. They may kill 5 of them in a row. If they get into a band of sheep, they may have killed up to 20-some head of them, never eat one of them. Just kill them because they're there and they're moving. They'll kill anything from a mouse to whatever they can handle. And they do kill grown animals. On the elk up here on the Wallapies, I watch that resident area herd, and they'll start out with calves. They'll be dropping them pretty quick. And I've got a little group that I monitor, or mentor rather. I've got 4 of them now that are teenagers. When they get 18, I quit taking them out. But I try to teach them the circle of life, and this herd's easy because it's near town and they can drive up there. 2 of them are 16 and drive. And they go up and check on them and start writing down when they breed, when they had the calves, how many calves they had, and then when it gets up to their year old, how many are left. Right. Some years there's no calves left. Some years half of them are left.
Right. Bernie, let's take a break here real quick. Folks, when we come back, Bernie's going to tell us some more lion stories. Then we're going to talk to him about his law enforcement days here as a lawman in Mohave County. Great show. Don't go away. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to Back at Camp. I'm your host, Don Martin. And on this special show, we're still talking with Bernie Lawrence, a mountain lion legend and lawman. So Bernie, tell us some more about the Mohave County and lion situation that you did and who you trained and what you did as part of your lion career.
I was talking about the Wallapai Mountain Park area. The mountain range is over 8,200 feet. It's a magnet to lion and bear. Bear come into this country occasionally and they go for the Wallapies. Any lion in the country that's on a rim and looking across and can see the Wallapies, he just has to come over there and take a look at it. It's just what it is. I take those young people, I've got 4 of them now, 2 13-year-olds and 2 16-year-olds up there. And it just happens below the dam at Pine Lake, there is rock piles, and lions love rock piles. They love those big cracks and piled up boulders. They can get in under them, they can have their kittens there. And there is a place there that I call a lion hotel. The Toms have established a mailbox for the females to come along and leave a letter that says, we are in heat and we are ready. That female would be around the area hanging around waiting for the Tom to come back. The Tom will come along and find where she's wet on his scratch, and she'll hang around and then they'll get together. If you have more than one Tom in the area, you may have 3 or 4 cats after the same female, which gets interesting because they fight like, it's the same as watching house cats, only bigger and a lot louder. At any rate, I take those kids up there and show them the elk, show them the deer, and then I take them where the lions are, and I never have got one of them to crawl in those holes to see if a lion's in there.
Well, that's a smart thing.
At any rate, after I trapped here for several years, I knew the major runs, and then I trapped the lions I wanted to trap, and the ones that I didn't, I left alone, and I just studying them because I was in a position to be out there and living with them all the time and learning. It's like you go to the academy and you come out of the academy and they've taught you everything about police work you'll ever need to know. Isn't that true? All it is an introduction.
There you go.
It's just an introduction. You learn about police work by doing it.
By being there.
Yes, and you can read all the literature you want on wildlife, but when you go out and spend time with them, actually living with them and studying them, you'll find out that a whole lot of those people that were writing didn't spend time with them. They were just repeating what somebody had told them or a theory they had. So I learned a lot about lion. I taught any rancher or cowboy to trap that would trap. And in 1960, I think it was 64, they had an uprising from down south there around Tucson where they had all them environmentalists and ecology type people, and they put pressure on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and stopped them from trapping lions. So from that point on, the people I trained had to trap their own.
And you trained a lot of local ranchers.
I trained the local ones. I also went to other areas in the state and trained them. I had people come up here. There was an old fellow by the name of Len Cool that was a sheep guide down in the southern part of, and he couldn't catch a lion. Anyway, he came up and said, "Bernie, could you show me how I've been trying to trap them lions down there, killing them sheep? We don't have enough sheep to spare." I said, "Yeah, I bring your traps." And the first thing we did is overhaul his traps.
Sure.
And then he went around with me. And when Len Koo went back, he removed 12 lions in 1 year out of those sheep in southern Arizona. Len taught other people. The lions that I personally caught were in the hundreds. The lion that I caused to be caught by all the people I trained, and I've trained them in other states, were in the thousands. And it was an effort that if you were concerned about an overpopulation of lions, it was okay. But if you were a preservationist and didn't believe in killing any animal, I wasn't really appreciated. Nor my efforts weren't appreciated.
Sure.
But there are actually more non-hunters than there are hunters. And a lion is a beautiful animal, but how many do you want to feed? Mm-hmm. And do you want to just have a lion, or do you want to have other things? Over in the Blacks, another fellow, Dale Lent and I, in 2 days we surveyed 15 adult lions. Wow. From the Chemehuevo Mountains to the dam. How many animals were they killing a week? At least 15 a week. There were no burro colts left. Some of the adult burros were being killed. The deer in those areas were down to almost zero. The sheep were dropping down fast. You're familiar with what I'm talking about.
Sure.
When I came here, and by the time they sent the game department people up here, one of them that I knew in his teens, he was still going to school, Don Wingfield. He was a regional manager, the first one. And he opened in an old building downtown here until they built him an office. They sent him George Welch in 1960 as a wildlife manager. There were only 7 wildlife managers. The rest of them were law enforcement more than managing wildlife. Mm-hmm. They just started in with that program. Anyway, George asked me to show him around to save him time. He was playing catch up. And we did the first sheep surveys, the 2 of us. We didn't have helicopters, we didn't have collars, we didn't have anything but spotting scopes and field glasses. And I showed him the sheep, and he says, "We have a token sheep hunt here, and I don't think we should have any. There's not over 200 sheep in this area." In 1989, there were between 2,000 and 2,400, the largest desert bighorn sheep in the world. That was from 200. George and I got together and talked it over, and Don Wingfield and the other employees, and they said, "Our goal is to increase the wildlife in this area, especially the sheep, and that little piddling handful of elk that are left up on the mountain, we want to stop the poaching on them, and we want to get some new blood in here and try to develop the elk herd back to when there were 300 there before they shot them down." Wow. Well, there's never been a hunt in here, and we want to get a hunt established there. So let's develop the wildlife to its highest potential here, and consider the habitat too. We don't want to overdo it. So that's what we agreed to, and we tried to get elk to put on the Wallapies, to change the bloodlines, little thin horned inbred elk. Nope, we've been waiting for years to get rid of them. They don't belong here. They were put in here by the Elks Club in 1927. Two cars come in on the train, they kicked them out, and the cowboys run them to the mountain. The biggest mistake they ever made. They tear down fences, they're a pain in the neck, and they compete directly for feed. Who wants the elk? Anyway, the land managers wouldn't agree to it, and neither would the livestock people. I was working with the Indians as well as the ranchers in this area. I met a fellow by the name of William Schroeder. He had been on different ranches, and he had been on the Apache reservation. Anyway, Bill said, would you help me establish a wildlife department here and get some stuff planted here and try to get some of these people off this welfare system?
Now, was this on the
Wallapai Reservation?
Wallapai Reservation. Okay.
I said, we can do that, Bill. Let me get George over. And George came over. We met with Schroeder and Norman Imus, who was the resource manager at that time, actually Forest Service. He was in the logging end of it. And he thought it was a good idea. And we went through the tribal council, and finally they agreed to get the elk. George ordered them up, and pretty soon they had another meeting, and somebody put in the bug in the ear, they're not Indian food. Deer are Indian food. We don't want those things on this reservation. So they canceled them. And then after a while, when different people got into the tribal chairman and different people changed, I got them talked into it again, did the same thing, and they did the same thing, they canceled it. George blew his top. He said, I can't deal with it. I can't deal with it. You seem to get along with them people. I don't know how you work with those people. They're worse than a bunch of kids. I won't do this. I've got responsibilities, and I line these up. The trucking and all this other stuff costs time and money.
Sure.
And these people got these things, and then they're ready to ship them, and then we can't do that. Anyway, I waited till they changed the structure again and did the politic, and then when the bulk of them were offered or open, they had a little meeting and they signed the papers. I handed them to George, and the next thing we knew, we were erecting the tailgate and the elk were on the reservation. The rest of it's history.
And now that there was no elk in Unit 10.
There were in the Northwest Arizona. When I came here, there was no elk hunting. No elk hunting. They weren't in 10. They had started in 10 at Williams.
Right.
There were some elk there. And 9 wasn't. And they weren't really, they had so much opposition against these competitive grass eaters that they couldn't get them put in here. And even the administrators, most of them in the department, didn't want to tackle it because it was too hot an issue.
But you established the wildlife up on the reservation. I mean, they hunt sheep, they hunt elk, deer. Now they're hunting javelina and everything else.
Well, that and the Navajo was the same way. They had killed everything out, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife man that was signed over there, he worked to bring that stuff back.
Let's take a quick break here, and then we're going to wrap this up. We're going to talk to Bernie about his lawman days here and what he sees in the future. So don't go away. We'll be right back with the conclusion of this special show with legend Bernie Lawrence. Welcome back to Back at Camp. Again, we have an interview today with Bernie Lawrence. Bernie's telling us about some of the history of his lion trapping experiences and that kind of thing here in Mojave County. Bernie, we know that you were instrumental in setting up the Wallapai Wildlife, where they ended up, now they've got elk and all these other species. And you've helped Game and Fish over the years, old guys like George Welch that just, I mean, without your help with him, they called George the father of bighorn sheep because he was the first one that really took an interest. And once you guys got these lions under control, the sheep population went up, and now we're in a situation now where we got 30 or 40 tags here in the county this year for sheep. Now, tell me about your lawman days. When did you first get into law enforcement?
When I got out of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, there was so much pressure on it to eliminate it, to stop an agency spending government money to kill wildlife. They were doing predator control, rodent control, bird control, all of those kinds of things. Anyway, I got tired of being harassed. I left here and went to Oregon. I worked for a fellow that I had worked down here on projects on the Mexican border on rabies control. He was a regional manager. And then they started the harassing up in Oregon, and they did away with 1080 poison. I don't know whether you were familiar with that or not.
Yep.
But that was one of their main tools for coyote control. At any rate, the ranchers down here, Buzz Hunt was the one that called me. He says, the lion are back again. There's more of them than when you started on them. And the cowboys have moved out, and ranchers have sold and moved. And he said, they're eating us up. I want you to come back down here and help us. And I said, well, I'm situated up here. I don't think so. And then a month later, he called me up and asked me, please, if I would come down. And I loaded up, came back down, and I set up a program here. We bought $4,500 in lion traps. And we got us some people that I showed how to do this, and we had a fix the trap day, and then we distributed the traps among all the different people. And there was no place in this country or over into Yavapai, all over this country there were lion traps on the runs. In 1 year on paper, we caught 24 lions, removed them from the area. 4 had been caught the year before. I had my dad over in 10, and I had Steve Medlin in the southern end of the county down here and up on Fort Rock. I trained them to trap, and my dad already was trapping, but Steve, I trained him to trap. He had a good job and was making good money, and I said, you can't lay off to trap. He said, I haven't had a calf crop in 2 years. I forgot to. And that's where I was running my cattle. He was out there then. Anyway, I worked myself out of a job. I was counting what lions and putting them on paper as required. I have no real idea how many they were killing.
Right.
This was our living type thing.
Sure.
And they were thinning out the lions. Anyway, they sort of lost interest after they quit losing
half their calf crops.
And Floyd Sisney was a sheriff at that time. I was calling into the sheriff's office and said, hey, I run into a butcher out here butchering the beef. And that happened several times. And it was close to election time. So Floyd, he went to a cattle meeting, a cattlemen's meeting, and he says, if you guys will vote for me, support me in the election, I'll pay his wages, half of them, because I'm calling him out to haul these town dicks out on investigations for you people with your livestock losses and damages on your ranches and burglaries and stuff. And my town people, they don't know what they're doing, so I'm using him a lot now, so I'll pay half his wages. Anyway, now I raise your right hand, you are one, and hand you a badge. I would call on the radio and they'd send somebody out to do the actual whatever. But then they found out I had to do the testifying because them town people didn't know how to present the case. And I just sort of got worked into law enforcement. By the time they had lost interest and weren't going to fund it anymore, I was hunting, but I was hunting people.
Criminals. You were hunting down criminals.
If you're a hunter, you've got to hunt something, And I found out hunting people was a whole lot more dangerous and a heck of a lot more of a challenge than hunting four-legged predators. So I continued to do predator control, plus I did the rancher's complaint. And then when Floyd got lost out in the election, and I can't remember what his name is now, but Jordan, Philip Jordan.
Phil Jordan, yeah.
He told me, he says, "You're not certified. This bull of picking up somebody on Front Street and swearing them in and giving them a gun that don't even know the laws is going to stop. And you're an older fellow, and I got younger guys. You're fired."
Oh.
So the cattlemen, I told them I'm not working. You know, they're not paying me anymore. And they said, "Is that right?" I said, "Yeah." And then they started telling me how long they'd been here, how many people they had in county government, how many people they had scattered out they were kin to. And they went and saw the sheriff, and they said, "We want you to consider." And he said, "What do you want me to consider?" He said, "You got rid of the only people we had, and it took us years to get anybody out here. All of it's concentrated in town. You're a county sheriff. How about the rest of us out in the county?" And he said, "Well, they weren't certified, neither one of them." And they said, "Do you understand Victor, Ocean, Tom, Edward? Vote?" He said, "Oh." They said, "We want our man."
Well, what the range detective?
He said, "Which one do you want?" He said, "We want Bernie because he can take care of our needs. When we get something we can't handle, he handles it. Besides, he knows something about our problems, and he actually has gotten people prosecuted, which the sheriff department hasn't." Okay, that's how I got in law enforcement.
Wow.
And then,
how long did you work? How long did you work in law?
I'm 72. So Dale Lent, they hired him out of California. He had some public relation job. He came over here, he'd just been retired from Vietnam, and he was like a lot of them Vietnam guys. I wouldn't say he was half above the law, but he was dangerous. I mean, you're over there in a kill or get killed situation, and a loud noise, you fall to the ground, roll in a firing position. I had a brother the same way, and he was screwy for years. Anyway, they got this guy hired, and he's down at Wickiup. And they said, "We want you to go by there and, you know, as a training officer." So one day I come by there, and he said, "Bernie, do you know so-and-so down on the ranch at Signal?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Can you believe him?" I said, "Well, he's got a lot of bull in him, but what's he telling you?" He says, "They're doing loads on McCracken Airstrip. Every Thursday at 2 in the morning, a plane comes in, lands, and transfers a load. He's watched them do it 3 times. And I said, "Oh, that's no big deal. There's 4 outfits running dope off of that strip. The deputy before you that was assigned here, he helped change a tire on a load vehicle, didn't have sense enough to know that they'd done a load."
Running a load of marijuana.
And he said, you mean that this is going on?" And I said, "All over the county. I report it, and they tell me, we're bread and butter law enforcement. We don't do this. We'll refer it to the feds." That's their job. He looks at me and he says, "That offends my sense of justice. I took an oath. I swore to uphold all the laws, not arbitrarily pick out the ones that I choose." Right. That is BS. So the next word I get from him is, "Come down to the patrol office." I come down there, and this room's full of people, the game department, Border Patrol, U.S. Customs, all kinds of people. And I looked at him, and I said, "What are you doing?" He says, he's got a blackboard there. He's been in the military. He's got this plan made. He said, "We're going to take that bunch off that's doing the load down there. I said, you are? Yeah. I listened to him for a while, planned it out, and have who's going to be here and what they're going to do. And I started to open the door and walk out, and he said, wait a minute. You see something wrong? I said, you got a bunch of town people here. They're running loads out there on the airstrip. They got counter surveillance. And you're going to take this mob out there and try to take them off? You're wasting your time. He said, well, if you're so damn smart, what would you do? I said, I would pick military types, not these guys that have to qualify and have been trained to kill on reflex. I would take your military types that maybe won't shoot each other. I'd pick some of those out and I'd take them into the strip and then set up. Put the rest of them on the perimeter. You don't need them out there with all kinds of vehicles coming into a remote area. That's stupid. He said, well, okay. Anyway, I have them in the horse trailer because they can't all fit in the cab of a pickup. I'm dragging a horse trailer. We stop, open the horse trailer, they get out. He takes his group and I'm going, he said, you better come along with us in case somebody runs and you can track them. You don't have, I know you don't want to do this, but just come along. Anyway, we're going down through there and he just does like that. One of these guys took off in a trot and I come up alongside of him. He said, recon. Anyway, the guy comes trotting back. He said, those two dumb jackasses that are taking the pickup that was hauling the horse trailer and we're supposed to go south and set up at Brown's Crossing, they're sitting down on the end of the strip. There's a load vehicle on the strip waiting for the load, and those damn fools are sitting down there in the pickup. I said, Dale, I told you, you take these townies out here and they'd screw it up. And he tell this recon, go down there and tell them to go where they're supposed to. So he trots down there. And I said, whoever was in that rig probably got out and took off. When we got down there, I checked out. He went out the door and took off on the run. It was a motorhome. Anyway, he says, we're going to stay here and see if the plane comes in. And besides, you said there's 3 other outfits. Maybe we'll get lucky and another one come in. Anyway, the plane came in right on time. Come right passed over, turned around, came back. He almost a touchdown when the light bulb turned on. No lights coming on, shining down the strip. This is wrong. He's been down in Mexico. He's flying with almost an exhausted gas tank because he doesn't want to fuel heavy because he's getting paid by the pound. Anyway, he gets it, just barely clears those dadgum Joshuas and goes south. And Dale, he says, what's he going to do? I said, he's almost out of gas. And he's got an alternate. And he's got an air to ground. And he's going to offload wherever they tell him to land. And since he's going south, it has to be pretty quick because I don't think he's got enough gas to go very far. Anyway, he says, okay, we'll just sit here until it gets about 4 o'clock and then we'll leave. So pretty soon we hear rattledy-bang, clatterdy-bam-bam, and 3 rigs pull up on the end of the strip. And one truck runs down to the motorhome. So he just, instead of nodding to his military guys, he nods to me, check it out. I'm laying there near the motorhome. I've crawled up behind the bush, and this ex-sergeant who is, he was a sergeant for DPS. He quit and went to work for the county down there on the border, out of Tucson, sheriff. He was working for, he had quit the sheriff department and was working, running loads. Anyway, this ex-sergeant, he was shining light around. He shined the light inside and shined the light around outside. and he shined the light right over me, and I was laying on my shotgun so it wouldn't shine. And I had the gun right here. He had a cleft in his chin, and I had it aimed right there at his chin, just a pistol. Anyway, he was just like here to her. Anyway, he took off, got in the truck, trucks went over the hill and they're gone. Went back down to Dale. He said, what went on? I told him what went on. I said that they spooked out at that motorhome. They knew it was somebody else running the load, and they couldn't figure out what was going on, and they spooked out. And he said, well, they were going to do loads here. What will they do? And I said, well, you got that one load that went out of here that had to be unloaded. You got 3 rigs. They've got to have at least 2 planes if they're using small planes or a twin. And that load's got to go down. They can't stay in the air. They got to land it. And if nothing else, just kick it out. But they'll be air to ground, and somewhere south, they're doing the load. So he said, well, damn, that was close, wasn't it? So they all loaded up and took off. I waited till they were all gone because I couldn't work with that many people. And I just took off on the tracks. And every time that one of them, when they stopped, I put down their tracks, I sketched their tracks, I wrote down which one took a piss and all that stuff. Went on down, got across on the other side, and it was full daylight. I could still track them. I could see where they'd turned the 2 planes around and they'd stomped the ground and done this offloading in the vehicles. I followed them on out the Alamo Road towards 93, and I seen where they turned off to the right, but their tracks were coming out. I thought, well, why did they had their loads on, why didn't they go on with the loads? Why are they going to the right? So I just followed them, and here they'd backed up and done a lot of jockeying. They had a bobtail truck along with 2 trucks with campers. Anyway, both these campers, this 4-wheel drive is going out in a deep track. I thought, them jackasses offloaded that dope and taken it out in the desert. Next thing I knew, there was a big pile of brush there, and I jumped out and brushed some aside, and there was piles of marijuana. And I just grabbed a sugar sack and threw it in the truck and got out of there. I didn't know whether they had a guy on it or not. Got back out to the road, and I couldn't get contact. The radio system wasn't that good. Got on a high point finally and talked to somebody. I said, tell that bunch with the net team if they want 2 truckloads of dope, it's down here by the Wayside Inn, and give them a description where it is. Have some of them come in 93, some of them come in Brown's Crossing. I'll sit here on it, and they should be back to pick it up. In fact, right now, a plane just flew over checking it. And I'm here beside the road with the hood up, like I'm broke down. And he's flown over me and went on out of here. Anyway, I left the pickup sitting on the road with the hood up, took my bedroll and went out and lay down by the fence. And I hadn't slept for 2 days, so I just went to sleep. And when I woke up, one of them, I heard one of them cops coming in just really ripping, coming down through there, and I trotted out to the road and flagged him down. There's old Larry Heathington and another guy with him. I said, I'm gonna go back taking my nap. Those guys haven't come in yet. Just get your rig out in the brush and hide it. So they pulled off. Pretty soon I was dreaming, and I heard these rough tires going down the strip. When I woke up, I sat up, and one of them twins that were running the operation, and this sergeant, ex-sergeant, he was driving. He pointed towards me. I was laying down, in my sleeping bag. My truck was still there with the hood up. And I had a dog with me. Anyway, it didn't faze them. They went right on by, went down to the dope. He let the kid out. And then he was coming back, running counter surveillance, and when he let the kid out on the road, and he trotted in, and the guy was driving. They had evidently handhelds. Anyway, he was romping on it when he went out of there, and this old kid's afoot in the desert. When he got there and saw my tracks, he knew that it had been found, and he took off and run. And by then, all those guys were coming in, and I fell in behind this guy with a pickup, and there was I don't know whether Headington was with me, I think he was. I said, well, as long as that dirt's rolling, we're okay. We can't see nothing. But when that quits rolling, he stopped. And I pray to God we can get to the left of him without wrecking this thing. Anyway, the dust stopped, and we slammed on our brakes, and when the dirt cleared off, there was an officer there that had stopped him. But he was reaching for a gun. He was like a traffic stop. I hollered at him, "Frank, wake up, he's reaching for a gun." Anyway, of course, he grabbed him, slammed him, and from that point on, Dale and I were doing airplanes. And about 2 weeks after that, he said, "Could we do another one?" I said, "Oh yeah, they're doing that all over. If you want to do one, but these people won't okay it. They won't give us the money or the overtime or anything else. We'll have to do it on our own." He said, "Okay, I want to do it just for the heck of it."
So then you went to work in aircraft interdiction, and I know real quickly.
Old Lent drugged me into it. I didn't want no part of drugs.
But he drug you into it, and you guys ended off working loads down in McCracken and Red Lake.
We took off 12 planes in a year.
Now, real quick, Bernie, we got to wrap this up, but real quick, tell me this story about the plane when the guy tried to run you over down there on McCracken.
I had Bob Murga with me, and Bob Murga was like a grub line cowboy. He worked for every outfit there was, including Customs. He just worked a year or two, and then he'd go to another outfit. Anyway, he was down there. He wanted to try this, and we'd been down there 2 weeks. And this twin engine come in. We had moccasins on made out of carpet, so we wouldn't leave any tracks. And we were running down. They did it on the far end of the strip. And we were running down through the brush at night, and they were doing this load out of the plane. The engines were still running. And I was running. I said, "Bob, they're not going to shut the engine's down. I don't even know if we're going to get to the plane before they're unloaded and out of here." And I said, "You cover the truck, and I'll get in front of the plane and try to get the pilot out to shut the engines." I was out there in the strip, and I was going like this and waving and shaking my gun at him, and he was just going. The plane was just kind of rocking. And when that last sack came off of there and the truck pulled out to the side, here he come. And I fell to the ground and rolled, and that left prop just about hit me. If it had hit me, it chopped me up. That really burned me. As that wing came over me, I just rolled up with Buck, and boom, through the side of it. I put as many rounds as I could before he went down the street. I shot a tire first. When I was there, right point blank when he was going over me, I shot the tire out. And then when he went over me, I shot through the plane at him. He's on down the strip in the air, cloud of dust. Here comes a truck out of there, and Bob, he got both rear tires with a shotgun, Buck. Anyway, he's gone. We're there in the dust. Murgel, he throws his hat down, stomps on it. He said, "I'm out here 2 weeks. My shorts are rotting off of me. The load comes in, the plane comes. We got nothing. We got nothing." I said, Bob, this isn't Starsky and Hutch. You got both rear tires of that buckshot.
He's going to be out here.
I said, "They're going flat. He's got a full load on that thing. It was overloaded. It's going to go flat. They're not going nowhere. Let's go to the truck." We run to the truck. We're going down through there. And I said, you watch for tracks turning off into the desert. Watch for tracks turning off into the. He said, I'm trying to hang on, slow this damn thing down. Anyway, I said, their track's turned off. We'll run and come in the other direction and get in front of him. Anyway, we got to the truck, and this guy was having a diabetic seizure, hanging onto the wheel. The other guy's gone. And we have to pry his hands loose and drag him out of the truck and then get some juice down him and then call for somebody to come down there.
Well, where'd they find the airplane?
It was at the airport. My wife and daughter were driving. They were down at Bullhead, and as they were driving by the airport, my daughter said, where's Dad tonight? And my wife said, he's down on one of them airstrips. And she said, that plane's acting strange. It's circled, and now it's coming back in. And he's going, well, he had one flat tire. Doesn't act right. And he's parked. He just parked and walked to the phone. She said, doesn't look right. Anyway, that was the guy I'd shot. He'd come into that Bullhead City Airport, walked to the phone booth, left a trail of blood from the plane to the phone booth, and was gone. So the sheriff got his plane, and he chewed me out for shooting holes in it. Because they had to pay to get it patched, and then sold it for $50,000.
Wow. Well, Bernie, this has been great, and man, I really appreciate you coming and telling us these stories. I mean, it's fantastic what you did for wildlife, and then what you did for law enforcement in your lifetime. And like I say, it's been, I've known you for 30, 40 years now. And folks, I can tell you one thing. This is one great man right here. He served the citizens. He served wildlife. He's a great man. It's been an honor to be with him. Bernie, thank you so much for coming.
You're more than welcome.
All right. This is your host, Don Martin. I hope you enjoyed this special show, reminding you, keep your powder dry, your firearms oiled, your fishing line fresh, and we'll see you next week back at camp.